Welcome everyone to the Special Olympics Coaches webinar series, proudly supported and presented by Gallagher and in partnership with ICOACHKIDS. Next slide, please. This webinar offers interpretation both in Spanish and English. Just go to the globe button and make your choice. You will also see a speech bubble. If you press that, it will allow you to ask questions. Feel free to use it. Next slide, please. So this webinar is on coaches' philosophy. Let's make a start. Next slide, please. Our first speaker is going to talk about something very close to my heart. I certainly learn best through play and having fun at the same time. When I deliver my balance bike sessions, it's more than just learning how to balance on a bike. It's about learning communication skills, numbers, words, colours, coordination, control, spatial awareness, all through play. I have the pleasure of introducing you to Owen Mooney, who is going to bring play and the role of coaching to life. Over to you, Owen.
Thank you, Kiera. I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, here we go. Okay. And while I share my screen, I'm going to start my timer. Hi everyone. I hope you and those close to you are safe and well. Huge thanks to Fiona for the invite today and for Jeff for all his contact beforehand. Thanks to all of you for joining the session. We really appreciate it. And Kiera, you've put me under a little bit of pressure. Thank you for your great introduction. I hope I can bring it to life. And as you can see, everyone, I am the warm-up act for when the real show begins with Kiera, Declan and Juan when they take over. So, having previously worked with Special Olympics in a previous capacity, previous to my role with Dublin GAA, I'm so privileged and humbled to be able to contribute to this brilliant initiative. So, before I go any further, I want to find out kind of what your needs and wants and your whys are for the webinar. So, in the chat function, if you want to put in, what do you want from this webinar? I know it's coaching philosophy, but if there's anything specific that you would like to find out, I know Kiera's discussed play, which I'm going to go into, but there might be a few key themes that you think I would like to learn a little bit more about this, just to see if I've pitched this webinar correctly. Maybe why did you sign up? Did you get an email from Jeff or from Fiona saying that you had to sign up? Putting a bit of pressure on you. I doubt that very much, but you never know. And what are you hoping to gain from this session? Now, I'll be engaging with you throughout the webinar and a couple of other things. I'm not trying to catch you out. So if you don't feel comfortable putting into the chat function, give them feedback, that is fine. Just as long as you have a little notepad and pen in front of you, because hopefully you will be able to learn one or two things from me. I don't know whether you will or not, but we'll see how we get on. So Fiona, if you want to let me know if there's anything coming through, so why people have joined the webinar, if there's anything specific that they want to find out, maybe what they're hoping to gain from the session. Now, it could be tumbleweed coming through. Nothing could be coming through yet, which is fine, but that'll happen later on maybe. So if there's nothing coming through.
Just a few hellos coming through, but interested in the topic because of its value. Lots of greetings.
Brilliant. That one about interest in the value, that'll definitely come through. A little bit of mine and definitely with Kiera, especially Juan and Declan also. So my reason for that little task is that I'm always curious. I'm always asking why. A little like Mindy from Animaniacs. For those of you of that age that remember Animaniacs, I'm always asking why several times to the person I'm talking to. And I just want to get to know more about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, etc. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm not trying to catch people out, even though in the past that might be the impression that I've given. Again, I just want to know why. I want to gain a better understanding of what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and why I'm doing a particular task. But also as a coach developer, I want to find out why coaches do what they do and why players and athletes do what they do as well. Again, just about being curious, and that's the beauty of play. And because of that sentiment, we learn best when problems and questions come before solutions and answers. This webinar is, on my side anyway, is a mix of my own experiences, my own research insights, and my own reflections to think about who I'm coaching, why play matters, and a better understanding of what play is, and tips of how to incorporate play into your coaching practice for the children, youth, or adults that you have in your sessions. So use the adapted model that you see on the right-hand side from Andy Abraham, Dave Collins, and Bob Muir. This here continues to help me in my decision-making process to make sense of how I coach through the medium of playing games. And I know that Declan is going to go into a little bit more detail about this later on. So you'll take what you want from my section of the webinar. My aim is for you to reflect on your own practices and leave you with more questions than answers. What works for me, or Kiera, or Juan, or Declan, or Fiona, or Jeff might not work so seamlessly for others because it's your context. It's very different. It's very unique for yourself. So reflecting on what you're doing is so important. So because I hope you gain a few what if questions, or I wonder if that would work for me, or what if I did this, what would happen? And that's kind of what I want you to think about, is because I don't know your context. But by giving you a few little examples of how I coach, hopefully you might be able to take that into your own coaching session to see what happens. I won't be giving you a list of takeaways at the end of this, because those takeaways would be my takeaways from the session of what I think your takeaway should be. I feel that would be me telling you what to do. And again, as you can probably get, I very rarely tell people what to do. I like to guide and probe and ask questions. But again, I want you to focus on, this is my context. So you'll take away what you think is best for you, for the people in your sessions, for your fellow coaches in your club, and your teams also. So why play? You can read the quote from Lev Vygotsky, who's a big underpinning theory in terms of my own research on play and the zone of proximal development. But looking at the play research that I've been looking at, play is so difficult to define. Dr. Stuart Brown, who wrote the book Play, How It Shapes the Brain, Opens the Imagination and Invigorates the Soul. I have the book behind me, so I might show you it later. Just says that play is a thing of beauty, and that defining it is like explaining a joke. Analysing the joke takes the joy out of it, just the same as analysing play can take the joy out of it. So within us, play can be constant. It's how children, youth, and adults as well find out about the world and their surroundings. So if you look at a child, if you look from them being born up until toddler age, so they'll lie down, they'll try and turn over, tummy time, they'll try and sit up, they'll maybe bum shuffle across the ground, they'll crawl, they'll pull themselves up, they'll fall, they'll then try and walk, they'll fall, they will try and run, and they'll fall a lot. And we all fall a lot. But all of this is without a conscious decision making as a child and as a toddler, or understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing it. They just do it. And to me, that is play. It's the art of being free and just doing it without thinking or without understanding of what I'm doing. Play is about exploration, enjoyment, opportunity. And one of the things that Kiera touched on was the value of play and how it can bring out people's personalities, how they see the world. You're able then to guide them and collaborate with them and get to know them a little bit better. And for me, in terms of my own coaching philosophy, I want to create a love for the game, for the sport that they play, for the club environment that they're involved in, and that the community that they're embedded in. And I feel that play has a lot to do with that. And again, you'll find out a little bit more later on. So just before we go into a little bit of the fun stuff, play is a human right. It's an international law. And you might have seen Article 12 and Article 31 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So Article 31 is the right to play. It's their game, not ours. It's their sport, not ours. And Article 31 recognises the importance of play that is self-directed, by the children, for the children, by the youth players, for the youth players, and definitely maybe being an adult for the adults, with the adults as well. So it's not just about children and play. Play can happen the whole way through the life cycle. Article 12 then is the right to be heard, and I'll go into more detail about that later on in terms of asking children their views, asking what they want, what they need, what they like to enjoy doing, making up their own games, why they've done that as opposed to something else, their experiences or perspectives, no matter what the athlete is doing, what the player is doing, nothing about us without us. So give them the opportunity to tell you what they're doing and why they're doing it. So I'll pose a little question. You don't have to put this into the chat function, but I just want you to think about it. Can we all be play friendly? What does play mean to you? So in relation to potential questions at the end, just have a little think about that. What does play mean to you? How might you incorporate play into your sessions? So in terms of my coaching, and I use the Scott Herbal I'm talking about now as the 6 basic elements of play. And I've used it as a player, I've used it as a coach developer, as a researcher, but in this here context, I'm going to use it as a coach. So Buzz Lightyear, as you see on screen, is anticipation. So ignition. So going to your practice session, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing how many players might be turning up, that wonderment of how the children or how your athletes are going to react to your session, the curiosity of not knowing yet, but you've come up with a plan. But again, there's that anticipation of what's to come. So a little bit of uncertainty. Then you're moving on then to surprise, which is Tom and Jerry. And that surprise can be positive or it can be a little bit constructive. It could be a negative surprise, as in something might happen during their session that it mightn't go well. Again, that surprise could be a new discovery, the uncertainty, which can kind of lead then to pleasure. And the pleasure aspect is a good feeling, satisfaction, happiness, fun. But again, it depends. It could be pleasure of knowing that you had a good session, knowing that you need to maybe improve as a coach. And that constant learning can be a real pleasure for yourself, reflecting on your coaching. Then you move in onto the aha moment. And this here is understanding of maybe skill acquisition, a new skill or a new knowledge base or new understanding for the players that maybe was a problem for them. And they got it. They understood it. They were able to do it. That aha moment then can lead to strength, which is Yoda. So in terms of the research, Yoda would be mastery. So understanding the experience of coming through tough times, overcoming new skills, new concepts, to then lead to Elsa, poise. So contentment, composure, grace, being able to do something really, really well. And that constant cycle is not linear. Sometimes as a coach, I'll start Tom and Jerry. And it will be not a good surprise, it'll be a negative surprise. Or I might start the aha moment, something I understand really well, but the players might find difficult. So they're in a constant stage of maybe wonderment of Buzz Lightyear, not knowing what's going to happen, what the coach is going to do. So again, that there element of the 6 basic elements of play just shows that development is not linear. For players, for athletes or coaches, patience, taking small steps, one thing at a time, and enjoying the process. So just again, in terms of your context, so using the chat function, can you put in one word that you associate that pops into your head with the people you coach, whether it's children, youth, or adults? Again, one word, not a sentence. So it could be with children, youth, or adults, one word that you think pops into your head that associates with that age group. So I'll give you a couple of seconds. And again, why I'm doing this is kind of just to get a feel of the people that you're coaching, but also making sure that, or thinking about your own reflections of your group, because you're thinking about it now. You're thinking, oh, I need a good word for my group. And you're reflecting on the people you're coaching. All right, just by this simple question. So Fiona, if there's any coming through, you can give me a couple of words.
Loads. I can't keep up. Joy, fun, dedicated, laughter, motivation, enthusiasm, hope, inspiring, rewarding, energetic. Oh my gosh, I can't keep up.
Brilliant.
Inclusive, acceptance.
Brilliant. Those words are fantastic. And if you notice that those words are associated with children, youth, and adults. All right, so it doesn't matter what age group you're coaching. You want to be inclusive. You want to make sure people are enjoying themselves, having fun, learning. And again, in terms of play, this is kind of how I would do it. And remember, this is my context. So in terms of play, this is from US Soccer, have this kind of model, and I kind of like it because it suits with my own biases, in fairness. But I like the concept of how it links to what I'm doing. So the top play and the top left-hand side would be discovery. So the whole part of the session, just let them at it, have a bit of crack, see what's happening. And you're creating kind of that social emotional connection, whether it's leaving the equipment out, get them to pick something and show me what you can do with it. So I'll get to see them kicking or throwing or running or moving or passing. I might even get them seeing throwing at a wall, throwing at a partner, it doesn't matter. I'm getting a better sense of what they can do. Because then when I go to practice, which is the middle part, and again, it's play practice. So it's more collaborative. It's more me working with the athlete, more me working with the player, just to get a better sense of asking them questions. Well, why don't you try this? And have you had a go at this? And getting them to make mistakes as well, because that's essential for our learning process as a coach, as a player. And that collaboration is building up those relationships, building up that environment that people are safe. But again, you're hitting Article 12. You're getting their opinions and their feelings about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then you'll go back into the last play, which is more purposeful. And this can be linked to what you want in the session as a coach. So what you think they need, but it's also linked to their wants. So they're playing with their friends, they're making up their own games. But in terms of the guided questions are more directed to what you think that they need in terms of skill development or something towards the actual game that they're playing. But it also could be behavior management, because the more purposeful element is more about, if you don't really know the players that well, you can set the games up, tell them what they're doing, and then just see how they play and see how they work with their group. And then you can be more guided in terms of what questions you bring up. The final kind of, before we finish off in terms of my own philosophy, is the magic principles. And again, you'll see them on screen so you can read them. But in terms of the research, Dr. Andre Abraham at Leeds Beckett identified 6 key knowledge sources for expert coaching. And it's something that we all do, but we mightn't think about as much. Understanding the player, understanding your sport, understanding the pedagogy, understanding your context, but also the player's context, process and practice, setting up games, setting up activities, but also understanding yourself. And this here is person-centered, and you'll see that it's all about development, all about appropriate level, challenge, and that everybody's involved. So all of this as a coach, we're in a constant negotiation with everything, with our environment, with our players, with ourselves, and it's about needs and wants. So they want something, but we think they need something. So we'll have a go at this to get this. And that valuing of opinion and not asking questions and making sure that it's the person first all the time is going to allow you to hit the sweet spot of play and practice and learning. And again, you're never going to be at the sweet spot all the time, but depending on the group that you're in and how well you know them, that conundrum and that pendulum will swing either way depending on their behavior or their knowledge of you or your relationship with them. But the best way I can coach the people in my care is involve them in the sessions, get to know them, give them responsibility, and also to have fun. So just finishing off, we've all ventured outside our comfort zone to be a coach. And right now we all have a chance to be a future maker. And right now we're all Rapunzels. So being Promethean, and what I mean by that is Prometheus was a Greek god who was thrown out for being creative and boldly original. And as coaches, we've taken the chance again to go outside our comfort zone, but to be Merlins, it's important to have a go, try new things, ask questions, talk, share and collaborate with your players. And above all, stay positive. So if I was to ask you the same question as a 6-year-old or as an adult, would they give the same answer? Favorite part of the game is the opportunity to play. I think so, but again, that could be my bias more than anything. This here is 2 first pages of my notebook. and it's something that I'll show you later on. It's in all my notebooks, and kind of this is what I want in every session. This is what the kind of the objectives that I would give myself. It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes some will happen more than others, but scaffolding the learning, collaborating with the people involved, involving them, two-way communication, asking questions, but reflection and feedback that I know Declan and Juan will go into later on is so vitally important. Questioning instead of telling, and no matter what you think, you have such an influence on the children, the youth, and the adults that you coach, and never forget that. You're a role model, and continue doing what you're doing. So, just to finish off, all I will say is stay true to yourself and your values. Remember your why and why you're doing it. Keep things in perspective. Enjoy the journey. Embrace the chaos. And more importantly, enjoy yourself. Let's support each other and let's do it together. Thank you for listening. I look forward to any questions and comments you might have. And I apologize, I am a minute and a half over 15. So, Jeff, I apologize.
Fiona, I think there are some questions in the question box for Owen. Do you want to tell Owen those questions?
Yeah, so I think what we'll do, Kiera, is we're going to get Owen to respond to those in the questions and answers. So I've already messaged Shane where Owen's going to deal with those now, Shane, if that's okay. And then you can motor on, Kiera.
Okay, cool. So next slide, please. So thank you, Owen, for that. That was fantastic. Really good job. For me, becoming a coach, the one thing that has been really important and helped me is me being an athlete first in my sports. My sports are cycling and swimming, and I've achieved quite a lot since joining the Special Olympics family in 2014. Next slide, please. Because I was an athlete first, it gave me that empathy to be able to coach others from tiny tots from age 2 to 5, learning balance bike. Next slide, please. Through to coaching, cycling on the velodrome and an outdoor cycling track as well. This is Daniel, and he's one of the Special Olympics athletes that I coach. He is non-verbal, so demonstrating and repetition is really important. Daniel has autism, and for me to ask him to allow somebody to come into his personal space has been such a huge step in his cycling journey. For me, being patient and making small steps in the right direction, this has enabled Daniel to compete in his first mainstream British cycling Cat 4 race this year. I am so proud of him. Next slide, please. I'm also a level 2 swimming teacher, and this year I was offered my own classes. I struggled to understand the time, but with a color-coded app, that's helped me deliver my own swimming classes and not needing someone to tell me the time. It's given me my independence. Next slide, please. I also teach children, young people, and adults with intellectual disabilities about a Special Olympics program called Fit 5. They learn about healthy eating, and it's just as important as the sport itself. I teach children about the Healthy Eat Well plates and food groups. Next slide, please. It's equally as important to give back to my local community, being a positive role model to children. Here I am sharing my Special Olympics journey to a school assembly. Next slide, please. During lockdown, I recognised that our Special Olympics athlete needed to be supported and to share how they are feeling. It's been a really scary time for many of them. So Dr. Neve Morton, she is a Special Olympics volunteer, and we deliver a Strong Minds Zoom session where the athletes get the chance to tell us how they're feeling, how things are going. I don't think we do this enough. For me, sport isn't just about the physical skills. It's also about your own emotional well-being. Next slide, please. Yet finding time to de-stress gets really difficult. I don't know about you, but doing 3 to 4 Zoom calls, team meetings is really hard to do, sitting in the same spots for hours. So as an athlete leader, I deliver sessions to corporate partners doing stress relief sessions. You should really have a go at it. It does work. Next slide, please. I also recognize for me to be able to get a job that I enjoy doing and I can do it at my pace is to create my own business. So watch this space. I just want to finish, next slide please. I'd like to finish with a saying that I really like. So I love inspiring people. And if I can make a difference in one person's life, then that's success for me. Thank you. Our next speaker works for Sport Island Coaching and is a founding member of ICOACHKIDS. I share this passion for good coaching practice for young people with disabilities. For me, the fundamental key is learning through inclusive play. Let me introduce you to Declan O'Leary, who is going to inspire us and help us see what they see. Declan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kiera, and thank you, Owen, for the warm-up. I think it was much more than a warm-up, but it was really interesting. First of all, can I just say, it's great to be here with you. I'm the ICOACHKIDS representative on it in supporting the coaching Special Olympics series of workshops and webinars, and we're very, very happy to be engaged with you on that. ICOACHKIDS has grown to be a global movement in terms of supporting coaches and helping them to be better and more effective. You can see the address, the web address on the top of the screen. But we have an approach when it comes to educating coaches, and we believe that we can't help. We can't make you learn anything. Learning happens yourself. It's within you that learning takes place, and all we can do is set an environment and provide tools to help you with that learning. So while you're here today, we're very, very happy to have you involved. And the challenge for you is how are you going to take that responsibility for your own learning? I think you have shown evidence of that through the questions you've put in, and the answers to what Owen has asked you to do, and your comments on Kiera as well. I'm a little more old-fashioned, and I'd always suggest you keep a piece of paper and a pen beside you to make your notes, and in that way you can take specifics for you to look back on afterwards. That idea of reflection is something that Owen and Kiera both mentioned. So to help you with this coaching philosophy, what I'm going to present now is kind of a more systematic way for you to develop one and for you to keep it refreshed based on your experience. So this is linked to some of the learning resources in ICOACHKIDS. It's linked to the massive open online course, or MOOC 1, Developing Effective Environments for Children in Sport. And it's related to chapter 2, what is a coaching philosophy and why it is important to be clear about yours. So we're mentioning those resources because in underpinning what Special Olympics are doing here for you as coaches, the intention is that you can go back and check these out afterwards. And Owen, I know, also has a number of resources that he's going to make available to you. Next slide, Jeff. So your philosophy, and we're starting here from personal, and this is where it comes from you, your core values, beliefs, and the impact it can have. What was really interesting about Owen's presentation is that you can sense Owen's passion and belief in the value of play for what he does in his coaching. And therefore he has used that to underpin the approach he takes to coaching. The reason for mentioning that is that you yourself will have your own core values, beliefs that can impact on things. It drives our everyday behaviors, the things that you do, and how you carry on. And when Kiera spoke, it was so evident that her values and beliefs underpin what she does, not only in the coaching environment, but in her life. And we're all the same. Next point, please, Jeff. And here, this is really one of the things about these webinars. And in some ways, we feel we're talking to people who've already done this. You have already stopped to think about what you're doing. But it's funny, if you only do it from time to time, you will get bits and pieces of where you're at. And the approach that I'm outlining is just for a way for you to do it in a little bit more of a systematic way. So not only the personal philosophy, but it'll impact on your coaching and how then you would carry out your coaching. So it impacts on how you coach. And last point, please, Jeff. So the real thing here is to take time. There's that word reflection again, to think about what you're doing, about your philosophy, what you believe sport should be, the values that you believe in, and then are they appropriate for the context in which you coach and how they might impact. And that takes just a little bit of reflection to do that. So the real question is for you to think about it. Next slide, please, Jeff. We're not making this up, okay? The research out there has identified that if you have developed and thought through your coaching philosophy, you will be a better coach. So could you just keep going through the slide there, please, Jeff? Thank you. The people who have written down there's that piece of paper again, they're written down their philosophy or their approach to coaching, clarified it for themselves, they're more effective and successful in their coaching. They know what drives them as a coach, it helps their motivation, keeps them happier, and they can be more proactive in their coaching, not unlike what both Owen and Kiera said about looking at things that happen, trying things that happen, and actually changing what's happening if they feel it isn't working or in line with their philosophy. So you make better decisions and faster decisions in line with your philosophy. And it answers the question, what should I do now? I think Owen called them the what if questions or I wonder questions. In my sport, we use the it depends question. Your context is unique to you and the athletes you coach. So that's the what should I do now has to be answered by you in your context. And the last thing is that when you are coaching in your environment and the approach you take, if you communicate that to the players or the athletes you work with and their parents or guardians, they know where you're coming from. It leads to better relationships and therefore better outcomes for all. And you become a powerful role model. And the last thing is this point I made at the start about where you're coming from and you're responsible for your learning. Your philosophy becomes a reference point for you to think about what you've done in terms of your practice, in what you've said, in what you do, in how you organize, and it can help you to improve all the time. You can become a better coach and a more effective coach for the athletes you work with, but for yourself also. So that's the selling point. How do you develop a philosophy? Owen made reference to this in his presentation with a much fancier diagram than I have, but it's the coach decision-making model developed by Abrams and colleagues in Leeds Beckett University. It is included in the ICOACHKIDS material in MOOC 1, Chapter 1, and I used it a couple of workshops ago or webinars ago as an underpinning thing for reflection. It helps you to look at what you do. So there's not really a need to go into a lot of depth on it, except to say that the white The white box is reflective of your context. The yellow, green, and red are the who you coach, how you coach, and what you coach. The little plan, do, review in the circle in the middle of it is your coaching, your reflection, and you continuing to be as good a coach as you can be for the athletes you coach and for yourself. But the blue box, which is sort of the support that underpins it all, is the understanding of yourself, your personal beliefs, values, and behaviors. So this philosophy starts with you, and it stems out from that into your practice. So that's where we're going to focus at for the remainder of the time I'm with you. Thanks, Jeff. So you have to ask yourself some key questions. And these will help you in developing. And this is the piece of paper again. Now, you don't have to answer them just now. They're personal to you. But if you answer these, it'll help to tease out what you want from your coaching and your philosophy. So the first 5 questions, why do I coach? What is the purpose of sport for athletes with an intellectual disability? What is the core of my job as a coach of athletes with an intellectual disability? How do I define success in my coaching context? And the 5th one, what are my core values? And the real thing here is that each of these questions informs the next one, and the 5th one informs the first one, and you go around this where they're informing each other as you tease out what your coaching philosophy is. And in doing this, you end up with, I suppose, the idea around what you're trying to achieve with the athletes and being true to your own values and your own self. There's a couple of other questions that we think are worth asking in relation to developing your philosophy. And they are the following: what are my ethical standards? And this is important for all of us. And depending where you are in the world, the ethical standards, sometimes there's a formal part to those. In some countries, you might have to go through police vetting, and also to do courses around safeguarding children or vulnerable adults. And I think that's an important consideration for you. And the 7th one is, who holds the power in a coach-participant relationship? The reason I'm mentioning that is I really think the Special Olympics are so strong on this. Owen used the expression, a person-first approach. In ICOACHKIDS, we talk about a child first, but in Special Olympics, you are so strong on an athlete-first approach. It's so admirable, and it's actually really good coaching practice for everybody. So they're the questions to ask yourself around the development of your philosophy, and then you can write it down. So here's an example on the next slide from a lady called Sarah Carrigan, who was an Olympian and a coach from Australia. And this is highlighted in the ICOACHKIDS material. You can see it there. Her priority is to gain as much enthusiasm from as many children as I can about being active. It's about children finding self-esteem and high levels of confidence so that they can take these skills out into their adulthood and establish an active lifestyle for years to come. What a very well-worded philosophy. But if you can see some of the keywords she has there and unpack them, you can see how that actually would drive what she does in her practice. Kiera, in her presentation, identified her philosophy and approach, and you could just see it flowing through everything else that she presented as she spoke, and the same for Owen. So writing your philosophy, and it's just getting it on paper initially. It mightn't be perfect. You might want to tweak it, and that's fine, because that's part of the process of getting it down. So once you have your philosophy written, you move on, because it has to, the intention here is that it's just not a nice statement and a nice one to put on the wall and you never live by it. The idea is that it helps to guide your actions and your statements. and what you do. And these action statements are ones that are very important. There's a number of examples of what it means in practice. And a couple of them that I would mention was a statement like, I give sufficient attention to all children in my sessions, regardless of ability. So all athletes would get some of your time. I make sure all athletes get good playing time in events or matches. I listen to and respect the individual needs of all children or athletes. So you can see where those examples are just ways that would, if you write them as action statements, they become for you a reference point as to whether you're coaching in line with your philosophy. Because you will always be challenged at some stage to make decisions that may not be in line with your philosophy, and you can only learn from those through your reflection. So these action statements are important. They come kind of the principles, or I've seen the word tenets used that underpin what you're doing. Moving on, Jeff, please. The important thing then, though, is that you have them, but you can communicate them to the athletes and perhaps their parents. And this communication, if you could keep going, Jeff. People then, it clarifies an understanding of where you stand as a coach and makes sense of your practice. It gives them a chance to input. Owen's point about play is that you were hearing from the participants and where they're at and where they're coming from. Participants include the coaches, and they understand it, but it also formalizes your commitment to it. It makes you more self-aware, and that point earlier about reflection, you can self-check. Really great presentation a couple of weeks ago, which talked about self-checking in practice and on practice. So this doesn't always happen after the sessions. You can actually think about it. Did I say something there? Did I do something there that's in line with my philosophy? You can also then package this in a coach's code of conduct. Now, some organizations and clubs have this and they challenge their coaches to live by a code of conduct. I think it would be important that you would adopt a code of conduct that's in line with your own coaching philosophy. So moving on again, Jeff. The point here about having it written down and reflecting on it is that it's an evolving. You don't stay the same. And I think it's very nicely summarized in the next statement by another Australian, this time a hockey player, an Olympic coach, who said, the coach you are and the coach you want to be are two different people. Make time to become the coach you want to be. And that's where the examples from Owen on play and Kiera on what she does, they're topics for you to weigh up and see how you might include those in your coaching. And you evolve through your reflection and through the development of your philosophy and your practice and that iterative approach. So you do that by reviewing and reflecting on your philosophy and your action statements. And that's why the piece of paper is great, because you can add things to it or you can change things to it and you can write it out again. And that kind of approach of evolving is important. The other way, and another way of doing it, was the idea of having co-coaches. And we're very keen on this for coaches to learn from each other. So a co-coach or a more experienced coach or a mentor, you could ask them to observe your coaching through the lens of your action statements and see if it's happening. There was an interesting presentation and reflection too, where you verbalize your coaching, you verbalize your thoughts. And again, if you record those, it can help you in what you're doing. And these days with so many mobile phones around, you can actually have somebody video you and you look at it yourself afterwards. And once you get over seeing yourself on screen and hearing your voice, you'll start listening to what you're saying. And when you look at that and what you do and what you say, it's a great learning tool for you as a coach. So I'm just coming to my last slide now, really. My last piece is that it's just a kind of a story of two coaches. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that one of the coaches, for example, is a coach who knows how they want to do it. but sticks to that. They coach the same, they're coaching for 10 years. They coach the same way year after year. They do the same activities. The children take part, or the athletes take part. And at the end of the year, they close their folder and they go out and they come back the next year and coach it. There's also then another coach who coaches during the year, but thinks about what they're doing, has defined the philosophy, and then uses sort of the coach decision-making model to say, who do I coach? What do I coach? How do I coach? They are listening, like Owen and Kiera said, to the athletes and what their needs and wants are. They're trying new approaches like play in what they're doing and the activities. And they think about it during the year. And at the end of the year, they make their notes about how it's gone, what things they would like to do, the challenges they faced, and what they're going to learn in the off season. They come back the next year and the season, and they're trying to put those into place. They've evolved their coaching philosophy. And over 10 years, this is how they grow as a coach. This is how they learn as a coach. And this is how they become more effective as a coach. So I'm leaving you with 2 questions. The first is, which coach would you like your athletes to be coached by? And the second one is, which coach would you see yourself or like yourself to be? I have an answer for myself with that one, and you need to have it for yourself. So that's it really. I'd like to think that you're a reflective coach with a good person-centered or athlete-centered coaching philosophy. And when I looked at some of the questions and some of the comments in the chat, people are challenged by their coaching, but by even asking the questions during the webinar, you're setting yourself up to find the answer. If you don't get it in the webinar, go elsewhere to find it. And in answering those questions for the athletes you coach, you're becoming a better, more effective coach, and you're coaching in line with your philosophy. So every success on that. Just in closing, the ICOACHKIDS website is there, the address is there again. There's sections about learning and connecting. And one of the connect areas, Fiona and Jeff have set up an interest group for Special Olympics coaches. And we'd encourage you to use that as one of those vehicles to ask your questions and get answers and network with other coaches who may have actually dealt with some of the issues that you or challenges you face and help you to do that. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you again for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Declan. That was fabulous, giving people some questions that they think about and they can make them better coaches. So our final speaker is not only an active athlete representing his country, he has the passion for sports development and peace. I can certainly relate with this, as we are both passionate active athletes, bringing the voices of other athletes to the forefront of social development. Let me introduce you to Juan Diego Blas. Over to you, Juan.
Thank you, Kiera. Well, first of all, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Special Olympics Latin America team for the invitation of being part of this webinar series. I'm very honored in being here. So, as Kiera said, I'm an athlete. I'm an active athlete. I was born with the congenital absence of the fibula, so I wear a prosthetic on my right leg. At the beginning, I didn't like this situation, and I wasn't happy with my leg. But thanks to sport, and my sport specifically, I overcame my disability. So I truly believe in the power of sport. I lived it myself, so that is why I'm going to talk a little bit about the specific part of coaching with values, because I think we don't only need the results or only winning medals or something like that, but through sport we can teach how athletes can develop in personal ways and in more ways in their life. So a little bit of the learning objectives of today's sessions is that we can identify the learner-centered approach. Owen and Declan talked about the importance of the learner-centered approach, the athlete-centered approach. I'm going to talk a little bit about that also. determine the importance of teaching values and life skills as coaches, because we are the ones who teach the athletes. So I think it's very, very important to teach values and life skills, and understand the power of a sport as a tool for development. I have a couple of projects I am involved here in Guatemala, so I want to help to show you some of the examples. Next one, Jeff, please. So I was part of the NCDA Coach Developer Academy in the Nippon Sports Science University last year, virtually because of the pandemic, but there were a couple of points that I liked a lot. So the first one was the difference between pedagogy and andragogy, and it's basically, as we can see in this image, pedagogy is all from the coach to the athletes, for example, and andragogy is a more interactive way. Here are some, it's a table comparing both ideas based on the Knowles learning principles. So the pedagogy, the learning depends basically on the coach itself, and on the andragogy, the athletes are self-directed and participate more in their learning. Also pedagogy, the coach experience is the most influential, and in andragogy, it takes in account the athlete's experience also, and this way they can, well, learn a little bit better. Also in the pedagogy, sometimes, not always, but they have, the athletes have low interest in learning because they are forced to be learning that way. And in the andragogy method, they are self-motivated, they are self-confident, so they can learn a little bit better. And the final thing is that pedagogy, the learning is based mostly on themes, on different subjects, on the themes itself. And the andragogy, the learning has relevance for real-life situations, and this is the most important thing, I think, because in teaching values, the important things of values is not just to teach the values as a theme or a subject, but to apply them in our daily life, in our school, in our training sessions, in our competitions, etc. Next one, please. Following up with the LEARN's principles, I liked a lot the magic principles that Owen taught us, and this is very similar. You can see some of the points that are also very similar. The first one, the LEARN's, the L is the learner-centered or athlete-centered approach. That is what we talked about before, and also Declan and Owen talked about it. The environment suitable for learning. This, Declan said a little bit about that we have to give this environment a healthy environment, a challenging environment also for our athletes, so they can promote the learning the best we can. The A stands for actively involved in their learning, because we need the athletes, as we told in the andragogy method, to be involved, to use their experience as a source of knowledge for other athletes, and become that interaction, being available, of being more active and being more involved in the learning. Very important part, I work a lot in sport for development workshops, and one of the things of the sport for development workshops is that you do a sporting workshops of any sport, or not a sport at all, just on a physical activity. And the most important part is after we do the sporting workshop, we need to reflect and we need to give feedback. We sit down and we ask some questions. What did they learn in this workshop? How they can apply it in their real life? We go to communities here in Guatemala that doesn't have access to food, education, and everything, so we can reflect on how this workshop can relate to their lives and how can they help them in their daily life. The N stands for new knowledge based on existing ones, based on the existing knowledge of the different athletes or the different coaches that are on the session. You can construct new knowledge for everyone. And as we mentioned a little bit in the part of the environment, it has to be challenged and stretched. So it doesn't have to be too easy for the athletes or too hard for the athletes, but you have to find a point in which it's challenging so they can promote the learning the best they can. Next one, Jeff, please. So I want to reflect a little bit about the main objectives of the different world movements, most of them sport related. These are their main goals, or what the objective of these organizations are. So in the International Olympic Committee that are in charge of the Olympic Games, They say that the Olympic movement contributes to a better and more peaceful world. The International Paralympic Committee that organizes the Paralympic Games, they say that the contribution to a better world for all people with disabilities. The United Nations, that it's not part of sport, but it's a big organization. Owen also mentioned a little bit about one of the charters they have. They say in their main charter that people at the United Nations are united for a better world, and Special Olympics, they say they strive to create a better world by fostering the acceptance and inclusion of all people. So if we can reflect and analyze what is common in these 4 great organizations is that all seek for a better and more peaceful world. So how can we get a better world through sport? I think sport is one of the greatest tools we have to bring a better world with values. So each of these organizations have 3 or 4 different values. The Olympics have 3 Olympic values. The Paralympics has 4 Paralympic values. The United Nations, they have 3 core values, and Special Olympic, they have 4 core values also. So I think it's very important that we don't focus only on the results and on the medals. I think Special Olympics do a great work in this part. It's not only focused on the competition, and I love the unified competitions, and they truly promote inclusion in their competitions. But even the Olympics and Paralympics that they promote winning and only high-end competition, the goal is to seek a better and more peaceful world. I know that this is not known, or this is not well delivered in all the world. They only think that they need to win the medals at all costs. But the main philosophy created by Pierre de Coubertin was to seek a better and more peaceful world through the sport. So I'm going to talk about 2 projects. Next one, Jeff, please, that I'm involved in. First, it's United Play International. It's a sport for development and peace organization that we founded with a friend in Canada. This was my thesis of my master's degree in sport organization management, and I like it because Kiera put an image of how they did in some workshop or in some trainings, how they passed, and wanted to know how the athletes feel in that part. And she said that we don't do it much often. I think it also. So my thesis was about how sport can create emotions, how games can create emotions. So we did this sport for development workshops in some poor communities here in Guatemala with the aid of this scale that it's called the Game and Emotions Scale. Is from a research that was made in Spain. So the idea of this research is that they measure 13 emotions, some positives and some negative ones. So you pass this before the workshop and after the workshop, and you see how these emotions behave. So at the end of my research is that all the positive emotions was promoted through the sport, and all the negative emotions were diminished after the Sport for Development workshop. The idea of the workshops is that you do some games with victory and without victory, and some games that doesn't include victory, so that you can compare the winning kid, the losing kid, or the one who didn't do. And in everyone, they promoted the best emotions, and they promote. So I'm going to pass a little video. Jeff, if you can help me pass the first one, please. So you can see what we do in this organization. Pues nos enteramos de un campamento de deporte para el desarrollo de la paz de las Naciones Unidas en Estados Unidos. Ahí ya conocí a Tyler Collymore, se llama, que es el que tiene United Play en Canadá. Entonces hablamos de eso. Él allá en Canadá lo que hace es recolectar equipo deportivo y donarlo, ¿verdad? Entonces yo le dije, ¿por qué no recolectás, me lo donás aquí en Guatemala? Y yo pues ya lo llevo a las comunidades que tenemos nosotros aquí en extrema pobreza y que tienen bastante necesidad. ya que trabajamos en Jocotillo, en Villacanales, ahorita estamos trabajando en Chimaltenango, estamos trabajando en San Miguel Dueñas, con diferentes organizaciones haciendo alianzas, llevándoles talleres de deporte para el desarrollo, les llevamos atletas para que les den charlas, nosotros mismos pues damos algunas charlas también, les estamos promoviendo pues diferentes actividades físicas adaptadas al nivel que tienen en las diferentes comunidades, que muchas veces no conocen nada del deporte, que no practican ni siquiera educación física.
El vínculo con United Play conmigo se dio gracias a la Academia Olímpica Guatemalteca. Después de eso tuve contacto con Juan Diego, él me invitó a este movimiento que es United Play Guatemala. Entonces él viene y nos llama a diferentes atletas para que le vengamos a ayudar con charlas, ya sea con talleres, y es muy bonito.
El objetivo principal de United Play es que busquemos en estas comunidades que realmente no tienen acceso a nada, lograr hacer mejores personas, mejores niños, mejores estudiantes, que se mantengan en la escuela. Es un programa educativo que puede ir paralelo con ellos, les enseñamos diferentes temas de valores, de educación, de higiene, de salud, les motivamos a practicar deporte, pero el principal objetivo es buscar mejores personas para Guatemala, que sean líderes, se vuelvan líderes en sus comunidades. So this is what we do in the first project I talked to you. The next one, please, because of the time. As they mentioned, I work at the Guatemalan Olympic Committee as head of sport for social development. I'm in charge of this specific program that it's called My Olympic Friend. My Olympic Friend is that we have different athlete mentors, volunteer athletes that inspire kids and youth in schools. Through video, they accompany the kids through the whole lective year with different lessons about excellence, respect, friendship, healthy living, working in community, how they set their goals and how they recommend the kids to set their goals also. The idea is look at more peaceful and better society. We are not interested in this program to create athletes, but to inspire kids to do what they want to do and spread the values and principles of Olympism with a program allied with the Ministry of Education. We have an alliance with the Ministry of Education here, so as you see in this image, and you can see in the video how the program works. This is one of the ways that we can include the coaching in values with the athletes itself. We have an athlete here from Special Olympics Guatemala that is volunteering in this program. He's one of the athlete leaders here in Special Olympics Guatemala, and he's one of the volunteers, and he is the mentor of one school without kids without disability, and he is the one who is the mentor. So to finish, I want to share you this last video because of the time. Please, Jeff, if you can share it.
Mi nombre es Marjorie Tashira Carrillo Vázquez y tengo 11 años. Vivo en la colonia de La Franja, Ciudad Villanueva, y estoy cursando 6º grado. Yo me levanto a las 6 en punto para ordenar mis útiles escolares y para ir rumbo con mi mamá a la escuela, porque entro a estudiar a las 7:30. La escuela donde yo estudio queda como a 2 kilómetros de mi casa y ese es el rumbo que diariamente cruzamos con mi mamá. Me gusta ir a estudiar porque sé de que eso me ayudará en el futuro y porque me gusta ir a compartir con mis amigos o con mi maestra.
El establecimiento atiende a 698 estudiantes en el nivel de primario y preprimario. Y la educación para nosotros es sumamente importante, que es lo que nosotros nos enfocamos en darle a la sociedad. Personas realmente educadas en todos los sentidos, no nada más en el aspecto de conocimientos, sino a nivel personal. Es importante que los niños a la edad escolar tengan una figura, que ellos visualicen un ejemplo. ¿Y quién mejor que un atleta? Mi amigo olímpico entra al establecimiento a través de la maestra de educación física que viene y me platica acerca del programa y es así como se contacta al comité y empezamos a trabajar, y lo hemos visto de manera positiva y favorable para los estudiantes porque muestran su emoción, su entrega, su alegría.
El programa Mi Amigo Olímpico es el acompañamiento de un atleta durante un año. Lo vemos en video, cada mes nos habla, nos da una lección, ¿verdad? Ya que gracias a los retos que ellos nos brindan, ¿verdad? O nos ponen, pues los niños han logrado tener metas que quizás antes no se habían planteado ellos. Al finalizar el programa, o ya más o menos en el mes de septiembre, pues nosotros logramos tener la presencia de ese atleta, ¿verdad? Y él pues nos comparte sus experiencias, sus emociones, o bien las dudas que los mismos niños vayan teniendo, ¿verdad?
Lo que más me motiva a mí de entrar a ese programa es de que día a día o cada semana nos mandan un video el atleta y cumplir con esos retos que él nos pone. El último video que nos mandó fue sobre investigar en qué año empezaron los Juegos Paralímpicos y los valores olímpicos que son excelencia, respeto y amistad.
Cuando vienen los atletas a visitarnos, ellos se sienten contentos porque ven que no es nada más el hacer un reto en donde se queda nada más en eso, sino que se le está dando un seguimiento, están recibiendo el apoyo directo de los atletas. Ellos empiezan a implementarlo en su vida diaria, no nada más dentro del establecimiento mientras dura el programa, sino que lo implementan a nivel personal.
So this is the program that we work here in the Guatemalan Olympic Committee, and as you can see, the importance of athletes as role models in the kids is very important. They impact the lives of the kids, and this is, to conclude, one of the things that I want to let you have, that your athletes are and can be excellent role models for everyone. And especially if you can teach them the life skills and the values that sport gives us just by itself, but you can promote them with these kind of workshops, you can promote it with these kinds of programs. Special Olympics does a great work, as I told you, with the Unified program and other programs that they have worldwide. So next 2 slides, please, Jeff. Just to thank you everyone for the invitation of being here. Here's my contact if you want to reach out for some of the programs. And thank you again to Fiona, to Jeff, and the Special Olympic Latin America team for the invitation. So thank you very much, and I give it back to you, Kiera.
Thank you, Juan. That was great that you've given us creative ways that coaches can be more inclusive in what they're doing. Thank you so much for that. I do have some questions for our speakers. My first question is to Owen. You spoke about the balance of play and practice. How do we find the balance when some athletes need more structured practice while some are comfortable with play?
Really, really good question. So, it's a conundrum for each of the athletes that you're working with, and for every athlete that you're working with. And that's where the play comes in. So if there's athletes and people that really enjoy play, then you obviously can make it more challenging for them to come up with their own games, add in rules, take out rules, be more specific about a skill that you want them to learn better during the game. If there's athletes that are finding it a little bit more difficult, and again, like the structured sessions, again, you can still do that through play. So if you look at the last play element that I talked about was more purposeful. So that's more specific to what you want to achieve during your session or what that athlete wants to do or likes to do. And if you look at the first play is setting up the games, making up their own games in teams, as long as they're safe, not hurting each other, just let them at it. Second one, more collaborative, getting their information, asking them questions, and being more collaborative about that relationship and in terms of their own play and their own learning. But the last one is where kind of this comes in terms of the balance. So setting up the games, and if it's 6 games, setting up all the 6 games. You tell them each of the 6 games, what's going to happen in every single game, and that's how they're going to play the game. But the play element comes into the teams that you put them in with. So I might put Kiera as a captain because when I've explained all the games, I'll go back to game 1 and I'll go, oh, I can't remember. What are we doing here in this game? And Kiera will put up her hand. Oh, this is team ball pass. We have to pass with our team. Brilliant. Kiera, you're the captain for that game because you understand, you've remembered what I've talked about. Whereas little Owen hasn't a clue what's happening in that game. But Owen is then put in Kiera's team. And then Kiera's going to help me out. And there's that structure around the game. But the play element is more around the relationships and the environment within the team. So they're still playing, for want of a better word, but it's more about their teammates, their friends, getting to learn the game, and maybe Kiera asking a question of that athlete during the game. So the structure is around what the rules are, how to play the game, but then that play element is more around the team that they're involved with.
Yeah, so peer coaching there. So if somebody fully understands it, they can kind of take on a bit of a role because it's challenging them. Because sometimes if someone gets something really quickly and some may not, that they might get a bit bored, they might be a bit restless. But if you give them a little bit of responsibility, then they feel like, oh, I feel special because I'm actually like helping somebody else.
And just on that, Kiera, just in that last element, because you're putting them into teams, you're putting them into teams as a coach. So Declan and Juan are never in the same team because Declan and Juan love being with each other, love messing about, want to have fun with each other, but then that upsets the rest of the game. So you'll put Declan and Juan in separate sessions. So again, that balance as a coach then is easier because Declan and Juan love being with each other, but they're not going to upset the play of the game or the practice of what you want to learn.
No, decent. Thank you very much for that. My next question is for Declan. A coaching philosophy is quite dynamic. How can we best monitor that when the philosophy changes over time?
I think it's through that process of reflection. I think that research has identified that coaches learn from how they were coached themselves, and I think they'll take from that elements that they feel worked and work when they coach. But they're also they also develop their coaching based on who they coach. And that's where all the questions in the group chat and so on are very, very interesting because they're based on the context in which people currently coach. So the fact that people have an open mind and are ready to ask those questions is a great starting point. I think they need to keep refining what the question is and try things. Coaching is quite complex if we want to get effective at it. So you need to think through it. And we use trial and error quite a bit. You try something, it works. You try something else, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean you're a bad coach or the athletes are bad. It just means it doesn't work. Your job then is to keep reflecting on it and refining it. But as you face each challenge and come up with an answer to it and try it in your coaching, it can reflect back on your action statements and can go back to your philosophy. And that's how it evolves over time. It really evolves over practice. You having that open mind, reflecting on it. And I do think we as coaches will always say, we try and set up a learning environment for athletes. I would love if clubs became a learning environment for coaches. I think they have so much to learn from each other, so much to discuss. But unfortunately, coaching, if it's focused on competition only, tends to be conducted in a way that keeps the folder close to your chest. I think in life we learn that if we face challenges and we reach out and help, that's classed as a strength. And I'd like to say that I think coaches who face challenges by talking to other coaches and talking to other people are showing strength in their coaching and will find it easier to develop and learn as they go. So that learning environment for coaches, I think for coaches to grow and develop is very important.
Well, thank you for that. There is an actual question that I've seen in the question and answer box. And the person when asking the question is, when you say athlete first, but what and who is second?
It's a very good question. I think when we go for catchphrases or short things, they don't always convey the depth that's there. The term athlete first or child first stems from the idea that sometimes in society or sometimes in clubs, when we coach, the club might have needs that come ahead of the athlete, or the coach themselves might have what they see as needs and wants that come ahead of the athlete. So for example, the coach wants to be a winning coach, and therefore they might make decisions around athletes that don't put the athlete first. So an athlete with an injury might not get played, or a policy of ensuring all athletes are involved in a tournament. There might be one or two athletes that don't get played because the coach wants to be a winning coach. That's where the term comes from. But I do get that there can be contextual, and indeed, because we're operating in this webinar across countries and continents, very much cultural differences. So the intention is that all needs and wants are catered to, but that the one that should be drive what's happening is those of the athlete. And the question did identify that they like to use the term athlete-centered, and I would support that very much.
Thank you, Declan. So my next question is for Juan. The games and the emotional skills, this can be used by coaches and athletes. And how would we best apply it?
Yes, so you can use it for both. As I mentioned, there are 13 different emotions. Also, I learned in the research that you can adapt those emotions of what are the most that interest you most to teach or to promote in your session. So you can pass them before, as I told you, it's a measure that from 1 to 10, how they feel in that specific emotions before the workshop. And then you do the workshop, do the activities, do the reflection questions and the learning session. And then you pass again the same scale, and they will do again from 1 to 10 and everything. And then you do the correlation. And I think, and in my research and the research that they did in Spain, that all the positive ones were promoted and the negative ones, well, not negative, but the negative ones are like shame or fear or something like that, or uncomfortable with the new games or something like that. So they are diminished after the game. So an interesting part here, I think it's very important that it can be also used with the coaches, and I think that it would be very important how the coach feel to do this session before the session, how they feel after the session, because not only the athletes are the ones that benefit of the sport, but the coaches, they also benefit themselves. So I think it's a great research. Now we have to do it with the coaches also.
That's such a great answer, because for one person to understand it to make a difference, that's okay. But sometimes if there's lots of other people, if you can't explain it to them because you don't understand it yourself, then how's that going to work logically? But also because as in a club, you want to kind of help engage so many more people than you probably are at the moment. But that's really helpful. Thank you, Juan. Our next slide that's going to be coming up is Special Olympics offers many coaching resources. I think there will be a link that'll be put into the chat. So please do click on that, have a look around and see what there is, because I'm sure you'll find something that will help you if you've got lots of questions. Next slide, please. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend our webinar today. Thank you to all our speakers, Owen, Declan and Juan. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder, the 5th coaches webinar is on the 21st of October, looking at mental well-being. This is a subject very close to my own heart, as I went through a very dark time, and sport and Special Olympics has helped me become the athletes and positive role model I am today. This session will be hosted by the amazing Kester Edwards, so please don't forget to book and register. And lastly, thank you to our presenting partner, Gallagher, and supporting partner, ICOACHKIDS. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Speak soon and take care.